today Mrigank Singh, our speaker for the evening. Mrigank is a CEO of Atal Incubation Center or AIC ISB Association, which is a collaboration between ISB and NITI Aayog with a mandate to foster entrepreneurship in the ecosystem. Mrigank is responsible for developing and executing AIC ISB strategy while continuously refining the service offerings. He manages a diverse set of partnerships and activities which support the AIC ISB startup growth and mission, and helps in designing cutting-edge curriculum as well for the incubation and acceleration program. Now, before we get into the exciting talk, a few quick Zoom guidelines for all of you. Please keep your audio muted. One thing is we would like this session to be very interactive, and we look forward to your active participation. So it's preferred actually if you keep your video on so that there is that interaction which can continue. Please post your questions on the chat section below, and we'll take it up at the end of the session after the talk. So without any further delay, I'll hand it over to Mrigank. Mrigank, thank you so much, and all yours.
Thank you, Shweta, for such a warm and formal welcome. Most of us know each other, and it is always happy to be a part of the Pro family again, and discussing things within the ISB community and the people associated with it. So, topic for today is how to kickstart your idea, and let me just start by sharing the screen right away. Can you guys see the screen now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Just give me one more. So, startup has been always a mystery to me and people around me. So, and a pleasant mystery to solve. All of us are looking for the pin code of the address where we find that startup nation, and we want to be a part of, we want to be the citizen to that nation. The reason you guys are here on this platform right now is a kind of a substantiation for that we are looking for that right pin code. I just want to say that we are not alone in the quest. Like, there's somewhere Tanvi, sitting there. That's why they invited me. They had a lot of other things, other people to go to. Shweta, has been asking me a lot of intelligent questions. Now, you have people in the investment ecosystem, in the mentor ecosystem, the startup ecosystem, like where people want to understand where is that fertile ground for the right kind of startups to grow. Is there a recipe for a successful startup? This is been a question which people from Paul Graham to different incubators and accelerators, people like Steve Blake, somebody in MIT, all of us are trying to answer this question. And during this conversation which we will have, we will try to answer this question, come up with a solution together. I think all of us are in a position to contribute and learn at the same time. So that's why I would love that this session is more interactive rather than a one-way, going forward. And let's see if we can create that recipe and see if it tastes good. Okay. So let me start by just putting it out there that what startup is not. Startup is not a miniature version of big business. I would going forward. I'm always open to any contests. Like, if people believe what I'm saying is wrong, it is a miniature version of big business. Please feel free to kind of chip in. For next 4-5 slides, please feel free to share your opinions around things. So, but I'm just putting it out there. I believe that startup is not a miniature version of big business. But then question arises: what is a startup? So, let us probe this question layer by layer. Is startup about, hard work? Like, I would like if anybody can, if anybody is passionate about it and wants to share that, yes, startup is only about hard work, I would love to listen their point of view around this. Nanda, do you think, I feel you are like a person who would feel that startup is a lot about hard work.
Absolutely. Mrigank, I can't agree more on that. Hard work would be the bedrock. And going forward, in present day scenario, it's not just hard work, it has to be smart hard work. Just hard work, doing a donkey also does a hard work, but probably does not
Right.
get you anywhere. Smart hard work is the way to go. Yeah.
So Nanda says it's about hard work and smart work. Okay. Okay. Then let's talk about this. Is startup about creating the right kind of business plan? And I want to probe this question further. Like, if we say that plan is the first casualty when rubber meets the road, then why plan at all? I just want to elicit some views around it. Like, do you think planning is cornerstone of creating a startup? A plan is a cornerstone of creating a startup, or is exercise of planning different from what plan is? Any views around this? Param? So people I know are becoming a natural casualty for this, but
I think the plan is definitely well planned is half executed. But what's more important is as we step on the road of the startup journey, I think the agility to alter and modify is very important. So definitely it starts with the planning well enough. But yes, taking into account that there will be some changes that we need to bring in the plans as we move along the road. That's what I feel.
so if I understand right, Param, you are saying that plan is good. Exercise of planning is even important, and ability to plan as and when situation evolve is something which is the kind of a cornerstone which can help startups grow. Is that correct?
Precisely.
Okay. So we'll park this. It's a very interesting thing, and I would like to discuss this with other armed forces personnel also. There's something called commander's intent, and we'll discuss about it. We are just parking this issue right now. So does anybody think that creativity is the kind of cornerstone of startup? If you are not creative, you cannot have a startup. Shweta, what do you think?
Yes, I actually always think that if my idea is not something out of the box or not very creative, then I'm not going to make it. So I think creativity is a big part of
Creativity. Okay.
That's my opinion.
Okay. What about passion?
I mean, if you don't have passion, you should not step into something where you have to build it on your own and take it forward. So that's a given. But there is a passion to change that one small, maybe a need that you see and you have experienced a problem in your own life and daily routine. And if you want to change that, I think that is also one way to look at it.
So passion is important. I agree.
Yeah.
Like I think till now we are all on the same page. But let me ask this core central question to Tanvi. Like, what do you think about idea? Like, do you think idea is important for starting a startup? But, the session is about kickstarting your idea. So
Yeah, I think I would say that because idea and creativity, I think, go hand in hand. I would say that you need to have a formidable, scalable idea to even start with. And then execution is another story altogether. But you need a strong idea to start with, I feel.
Yeah. So what I'll do right now, I'll just put all what we have discussed till now and turn it upside down actually. What I believe is that it's not about kickstarting your idea, which is the core theme of this session, but it's about how do you use your idea, passion, business plan to kickstart you. And I'll explain this because this is the hypothesis I'm going with during this interaction right now. All these things, idea, passion, creativity, business plan, are very important. Without them, you do not have a startup. These are core ingredients of a startup. But what is their place? Are they your vehicle or are they the spark plug in your vehicle? Is the kind of discussion we are having today. So any thoughts around that? Like, I just turned the idea where we started with kickstarting your idea upside down and saying that idea is actually kickstarting you. Any observations around this? Somebody wants to share something?
Yeah, so Aman here. So I think that's like the fundamental block, and everything else sort of surrounds it. It just builds upon that. But I think your idea is, your core foundation, and whether it's scalable or what problem you are solving, everything revolves around that core idea. If you're not clear about what you're trying to achieve or why you're trying to solve it, you're faltering right from the start.
Right. So you're saying is that idea is central, and you can think of, you cannot turn it upside down. Is that the sense I'm getting, or like what is your what do you think about it?
From my perspective, yeah, like that has to be the first thing.
Okay, so idea has to be first, and it is the vehicle and not the spark plug which you are talking about, right?
Right.
Okay, good. So we have some disagreement. This is fantastic. Always disagreements are fantastic to have in a discussion. Okay, we'll go further. So, my observation around this ecosystem is startup is, these ideas are kind of a spark plug, which are very useful to, initiate your vehicle, startup vehicle. And when I say startup vehicle, it's about creating an organization. What is a startup? Startup is a team, is creating an organization with the right kind of ingredients that perform certain functions. We'll talk about the organization, the ingredients and functions as well as we go forward. And these ingredients, the organizational structure, the functions, they change as the startups, stages changes from one to another. But my hypothesis is, and then we will discuss about it in the end during the post the primary discussion which we are having, that is idea facilitating the initiation for that. Okay. Now I'm opening up the idea of a startup, and not the idea of the startup, but the concept of a startup, and kind of going out and explaining it and differentiating it from how it's different from a business. Startup is a temporary organization. It's not a permanent state of a company. It's a temporary state of a company. A company which is operating in realm of uncertainty. They are into new areas, in uncertain areas where a lot of existing data, existing examples do not exist, are not present. Startups are into the search of repeatable and scalable business. Search is a very operational word here, because that's how differentiate between a business and a startup. Business has a certain amount of data with them. They make a plan and they execute. There's a lot of stability around it. Startup is in the realm of searching things in uncertain areas. How to find repeatable and scalable business in uncertain areas is the forte of startups. And that's why their nature and the way they operate is different from a business. And then in the end, startup is about executing in the lean framework. So I'll elaborate more on these things in slides to come. When I say search, there has to be a scientific approach to build, test, iterate. How does an organization which is designed to execute different from an organization which is designed to search? And I'll elaborate more on it now. An organization which is designed to search tends to create data and does not gathers data from meta information. So if you see this guy, he's upside down, and I have particularly done this because if you look at the way we kind of comprehend data, we always go to the macro level and then iterate to the micro level. But the way startups operate, they do primary research, go talk to people, talk to customers, understand what are their pain points, what is the awareness of their pain points. Are they ready to buy a solution? Do they know that they need a solution? Are they actively looking for the solution? Have they earmarked a budget for this particular solution? This is the pain scale awareness which they look into for their customers, and see what they are providing is actually solving the problem and customer has the willingness to pay for it. That is where they kind of create the data in a very lean way. So they are into realm of creating data. where data does not exist before. Once they create data, they form a hypothesis around it. Tools like business model canvas are nothing but aggregation of hypotheses of the entire business model. So they would form hypotheses around the customer segment, the value addition, the kind of channels which the startups can have, what is the revenue structure, what is the cost structure. They are all set of hypotheses right now. But then what? Then startups kind of dive in. They do not just sit in offices, they go and validate the assumptions. They would validate the assumptions in a very lean way, where a lot of other organizations would not go. They would go with a buggy product to a technology enthusiast and see what is the kind of attention this guy is paying to it. Even before they have a product, they would have an MVP ready with a video where they would see that how many eyeballs this MVP is catching to validate those assumptions. And I'll talk about this more in about the product stage when in the slides to come. But the idea is that startups validate their hypothesis. And once they validate their hypothesis, and this is a very important point, that they do not create their customers like usual businesses do. They create customers. Startups only find their customers at a certain stage. After that, they do create customers. But to begin with, they have technology enthusiasts and visionaries where they just find those people who can work with them in creating a product. Let me go to the next slide and it will be more clear. So if you look at the, this graph, you see technology enthusiasts and visionaries. This is the realm where these guys are just finding their customers and they are not creating their customers. And when you go into the main market is when they create their customers. But if you see, there is a gap in between. There is a chasm in between. And this is where a lot of startups fail. And I'll discuss why do they fail and what they should do right to kind of cross the chasm also. The width of the chasm also depends upon the kind of market these startups are in. If a startup is in an existing market, then the gap is smaller. It's like there is no gap actually. If they are in new markets, the gap is much wider. It would take them 5-6 years for even customer education and all. And if they are in, say, resegmented market where they're kind of resegmenting the way people think about the product, they came up with a new cost which gave access to a new category of people altogether. Like it happened with drones, when drones value dropped to around 90,000 and then everybody had those drones with them and were using those applications. Earlier, which was only used by military, is a classic example of resegmentation of an earlier technology with a new market segment discovered due to fall in price. So that is called resegmentation. So this gap differs as per the market we are in. So in terms of startups, the customer development differs before the chasm and after the chasm. Before chasm, they are just creating customers. They are going to with their buggy products to visionaries, to technology enthusiasts, getting it validated, getting the right kind of feedback, using it again. But the point is, why does this chasm exist at all? That is a very critical question. Any market segment is defined by the ability of people, if it is solving a common need, and also at the same time, people can reference each other. The interesting thing is that the technology enthusiasts and visionaries can reference the product within each other, but they have their reference is not valued in the main market. And that is why they have this tricky situation where they have the product which somebody bought, but their reference does not has weightage in the regular market. And now they have to do the transition in a smooth way. How do they do that? It's again drawn from this military strategy where they create a beachhead market. Beachhead market is again a market which is not very large and not very small. It's just optimum, where they can become market leaders. And once they become market leaders, because of the ecosystem development, their costs are manageable and can be adopted by the mainstream market as well. So there's an entire framework around that which we can discuss some other time. But just going forward, as as the customer development cycle changes, the structure of the organization also has to change. Initially, when we are talking of technology enthusiasts and visionary markets, when we are catering to them, we need a startup which actually fits in a phone booth. It's only development team which is working on the product and going out and taking feedbacks and then again working on the product. But as we are crossing the chasm, we convert it into a mission-centric organization where they have a mission of a beachhead acquiring adjacent markets. But just note this, that we still do not have VP sales and VP markets, and we do not have processes present in the organization. It's still very mission-oriented, that this is the beachhead market, this is the adjacent market, we have to capture that. It's very specific to the kind of market they are in. And you do not have a dedicated sales and a marketing team. Post that, when you become a process-centric organization, and this is where you are catering to the main market, is where you develop processes and the marketing and the sales team. This is the execute function, which somewhat resonates with the rest of businesses as well. Yeah, I'll kind of elaborate few more things about startups before we kind of get into other things. Startups, there are different aspects of startups which one needs to know before getting into it. Like, what is the growth engine of a startup? So does it have a sticky growth engine, a paid growth engine, or a viral growth engine? And I'll give an example for this as well. So for example, WhatsApp. WhatsApp is you don't hear ads of WhatsApp. It's a once somebody has downloaded it, other people have to download it to be connected. That's a viral growth engine. You do not grow because you pay for advertisement. On the other hand, paid advertisement is where, the other examples, the regular things where you kind of go for advertisements and then you have certain growth. But in that case, we have to think about what is the cost of customer acquisition and the lifetime value of the customer. This is where cost of customer acquisition and LTV actually plays a role if we are in the paid growth market. And then we have to see that the unit economics is working right. Similarly, if we are in the sticky growth engine, then we have to pay more attention to our customers who we already have. The retention rate should be high, and our existing customers should be paying more rather than acquiring new customers. So the strategy differs when we're talking about the growth engine. Similarly, the market type, which we discussed earlier also, there are three types of market types: existing market, future markets, and resegmented market. The only difference is the existing market, the cost of entry barrier. The entry barrier is very low. The graph is linear, you can go up and come down. Future market, the entry barrier is high, but there is a 6-7 years of education cycle, and startups should be aware of that. And that actually governs the way they have to spend their marketing budget. The kind of strategy they have to use for marketing is very different in both the cases. And then you have a resegmented market where the entire focus is to kind of redefine a market through use of a niche or a price. So the risk in this particular segment is the way you are redefining the market. If somebody else redefines it, then your whole value proposition goes for a toss. So the strategies, the business spending, everything differs as per the market type. As far as the core competency is concerned, a lot of people think that creating IPs is our core competency. But core competency is actually defined as team's internal capability to generate constant value for the customer. So for example, if you talk about Apple's core competency is use of technology and humanities to kind of come up with a better user experience, and which other companies have not been able to provide. And they have been doing it successfully for years now. But it is different from the competition ring, the moat which we talk about. If you take an example of a moat and a fort, moat is where those, you have that river which is dug deep and you have alligators in it, which prevents competition to come inside. IP and things like that can be the moat. But the core competency is the team's capability to kind of add constant value to the customer. So this particular core competency again depends upon the kind of work you are doing, the kind of companies you are dealing with, the kind of market segments you are working on. Going ahead, like about the product stage, like we have different kind of product stage. You have a MVP one. MVP one may be like a video which you send to a customer, to 10 customers, and see that how much time they are actually spending on that video. So the product is not even made. And similarly, like you have a lot of intermediate MVPs. These are intermediate MVPs. It can be a website where At the back end, all the work is mechanical right now. We have not invested in automation, but in the front end, it is not visible like that. That is a one sort of MVP. These are MVPs. But when we talk of MVP, it's about minimum viable product which somebody is ready to pay for. It's called minimum viable business product. Here is where the money angle is involved. And once that happens, that is a very strong form of customer validation. So we have MVPs, we have MVP, then we are talking about a product. A product is different from MVP because now it's a more stabilized output. But there's still one more stage, holistic product, the whole product which we talk about. So for example, when you are getting your internet fixed by Airtel in your houses, so Airtel gives you that bandwidth and that connection. But there's somebody who comes and does the, installs the cable with you. Somebody comes for the router thing, and somebody comes and does all the subscription work for you. So although Airtel is just selling internet connections to you, it ensures that the cable, the router, and everything is given to you in a holistic manner, and that's called a whole product. So we have to figure out within the companies that what stage of product they are in right now. Then we talk about the customer segment, as we were talking, the segment of visionaries and technology enthusiasts. Their nature is very different from mainstream market. Mainstream market where people are very cost sensitive, people believe only people would invest only in market leaders, versus enthusiasts and visionaries where they would kind of invest in a buggy product also. They would work with you. They would have expectations which you probably cannot ever fulfill. They want to be the first person on the market to implement that. So the nature of the customers is very different in these customer segments, and we have to if I say one thing which startups need to do clearly to begin with is to gravitate to the right kind of customer segment. This particular exercise requires a lot of work. About the organizational culture, we discussed just before this slide only that it can be development centric, mission centric, and process centric depending upon the stage of the organization. In this particular case, I find a lot of startups where their product stage is very different from their organizational culture. So, that kind of brings in a lot of inconsistency and results in a cash flow issue for these companies as well. So there has to be a kind of a resonance between the two. In terms of business model, we can talk about a lot of business models, Premium, Gillette. There are many business models. The idea is to capture the value. So the insight here is that a lot of startups spend a lot of time in creating value, but they spend very little time in capturing value. So this business model engineering has to be very clear in terms of how to capture value for the startups. And lean framework. The lean framework is all about how do you create those MVPs at a very optimal cost. Like you don't go to 10 people to test those MVPs. You do go to a couple of people, get the right kind of inferences in place, hypotheses in place, and then you test them. And there's something called a single flow work where everybody comes together, unlike a process-centric organization where everybody is kind of doing its own work. Single flow system kind of brings everybody together, and they want them to work on one thing at a time. It is not very efficient, but it brings in the entire perspective of the team. It is efficient as far as that stage of organization is concerned. So this is the kind of differences we are talking about here. Now, I would kind of make a shift to this. This was the broad deal of frameworks which we deal with when we are engaging with our startups. And what does Incubator actually do in this entire ecosystem? So Incubator is a platform to give an environment of trust and safety to entrepreneurs where they feel that, yes, it is okay to fail. Nobody is judging them. Nobody is questioning them. They can come up with, out of the box ideas, and nobody would be, kind of looking them as that they are crazy, because a lot of these crazy ideas have become successful. Airbnb was one of them. Everybody thought that nobody's going to let anybody stay in their home. To offer strategic and honest guidance to startups. We don't offer day-to-day guidance, but in terms of strategic guidance, like we discussed earlier, the kind of frameworks we were talking about, we see where there is, in which categories the product, the market, the growth engine, these guys lie, and based on them, what kind of tools and techniques can help them in getting to the next stage. To connect startups to the relevant stakeholders in terms of mentors, investors, service, etc. Because we deal with startups on day-to-day basis, so we have the pool of the different stakeholders of the ecosystem, and we connect with them. But I would say I have to say one line about incubators is that it brings down the level of uncertainty in the startup game, and not only for startups but for all the players. For investors, they have more filtered kind of startups which they can invest in because we are working with them. They have more insight. For mentors, they are engaging with the right kind of startup. For startups, they know that these are the mentors and the investors they can trust. So the level of, as it is, the startup game is very uncertain. The role of an incubator is to bring down the uncertainty to a certain level. Like, I would not oversell myself and say that we do it at a great, to a great extent, but we do a bit of a job in this entire ecosystem. At the same time, I would like to take this opportunity to kind of tell what incubators and accelerators are not. So incubators, the difference between the incubator and accelerator is that incubators kind of works on a growth on a pre-growth stage startups, and accelerators work on a growth stage startups. But these formats differ as with different countries, with different kind of organizations. So I'll not go too much into the detail of incubators and accelerators. But incubators and accelerators are not funding agencies, are not PR agencies, they are not customers of startups, they are not business promotion organizations which will kind of promote startups business directly. Yes, we have connections and we kind of recommend certain things to certain organizations, but we are not specifically business promotion organizations, and we are not extension of team for day-to-day operations, but we are there for strategy guidance and working on the entire framework of things. Now, Shweta asked me to just talk about is time on our side? Is Corona this whole pandemic thing? We hear a lot of negative news these days. And there is a lot of instability as of now. But how about starting a startup in these uncertain times? And the way we have defined it, just think about it, that an organization which is good at executing versus an organization which is good at searching and executing. Startups are made for uncertainty. I'm not saying that it's a very fertile ground right now, but if you need one chance, this is the best time for you right now. The kind of uncertainty we have, uncertainty is directly resulting in a lot of opportunity. And if you see, there have been 3 kinds of reaction in the startup ecosystem. Like, there are innovative restaurants, like I would not call restaurants a startup, but still, like, there are restaurants and delivery partners where these guys have seen a drop of orders by 60 to 70%, and their revenue has fell by 40%. There are certain areas of work where, or certain organizations where they are trying to figure out what is the shared mobility in terms of like the shared mobility business and the shared living business. Today is they are still trying to figure out what is the next way forward in terms of mobility. They are thinking that can we do a long-term lease kind of a thing versus everyday mobility sharing, so that to lower the apprehension of hygiene for people. But there are certain areas where startups are thriving. If you look at vernacular apps like Vocal or Kaku FM, like their daily active users have doubled. Like Kaku, if you see, like from 5,000 DAUs to 10,000 DAUs. If you see Vocal, the questions asked have doubled from 7,000 answers a day to, it's not even doubled, like it's like 4 times, 25,000 a day. If you look at e-commerce companies, Amazon and Flipkart, big basket brokers, they have 2 to 3 times surge in their orders. If you look at online broking companies like Zerodha, so it went from daily trades of 3.5 million to 7 million in March. So they have excess of demand, yes. They have a different kind of challenge. They have cash flow challenges. They have business model challenges, because till now they were working on VC money. Now they have to directly capture it to the value from their user. So they have business model challenges. They have other challenges, cash flow challenges, but at the same time, they are seeing tremendous amount of growth as well. So I just would want to put it out there that Corona is definitely a pandemic, and all of us are, kind of trying to get our way through it. But as far as startups are concerned, I think it's a fantastic, fantastic opportunity to kind of find a method to this madness and see where we can add value. So this will be all from my side for now, and I'm open for questions.
Thank you, Mrigank. This was great. We do have some questions, but I also have some questions that I want to just pose to you. If we go back to the start of the section, actually, you were talking about what a startup is not. It's not a miniature big organization, is how you described it. I want to understand better what differentiates a startup from a small business and a corporation. Is it the idea? Is it the size of your startup? What is it that differentiates?
So I think it's the entire way, it's the functionality of a startup. Like when you say a corporate has a very strong planning associated with it, and they do not tread into the realm of very uncertain areas to begin with. They have a certain plan, they have certain data with them, and they do planning exercise based on that data, and they execute. Versus startup, they are into the search mode. The functionality of search differentiates them from corporates which are into the execute mode. I think this is the core difference in terms of, and startups are temporary organizations, as I said earlier also, that they're a phase of an organization. They are not kind of an organization.
That's why something like an Uber and Ola, which pretty much serve the same need, are both considered startups in their own sense, because
Yes. So like this is that way. It's like we define startups that way, but I think now they have kind of shifted and gravitated towards the more process centric. They have already traveled that far. Now they are more of companies than startups.
Yeah, of course, yeah, but yeah, as you said, they were temporarily a startup at some point, and then they've moved with the planning. And so just to segue into the planning and ideating phase, right? And we do have a question on that, but just want to get your thoughts on how much time do like budding entrepreneurs, at least the first time entrepreneurs, typically spend on the ideating phase, and what is your recommendation to them as to how much do they have to have their idea panned out or vetted? At least, a lot of people ask their family and friends, and just to get a sense of whether this is something that he or she should go forward with. I just want to get your sense on the time that they should spend on the ideating and just the planning phase of if it's a worthwhile thing to go ahead.
It's a very interesting question actually. I feel that, and I've seen this when we talk to a lot of startups during their pitches and all also. A lot of people develop their thought process in isolation. Like when I say I have an idea, I think about a problem and I kind of have a solution for that. Okay. A lot of engineers do think about, me being an engineer myself, I know that how product centric we are when we talk about a particular thing. We want to solve a problem, but through engineering. This is the way we think about it. But I think that we should not spend time at all on the idea itself. In terms of, you create idea, you because as I said, that it's a vehicle to generate passion amongst your friends, all of people who get a buy-in into that. When there's nothing, there's an idea which excites people to come on a particular platform. Yeah. That's why I call it a spark plug. But as soon as you have something ready, like just go out and test it in the market. Just go out of the building. Do not do things in isolation. You immediately have to run to the customer and have to find a creative way to see if somebody has the willingness to pay. Does somebody have a pain point to solve what I'm thinking as an idea? So you need to go out immediately. And as far as when you talk about timelines for idea to convert, like if I kind of fit it into the market type question, it depends upon what kind of market you are dealing with. If you are dealing with a futuristic market, when you think of something, one should be convinced that there is a long time to go. You need to spend 6-7 years approximately, and I'm not committing to a particular number. I'm just saying that, giving a sense of it in terms of educating people and ensuring that the market is ready at that point of time. Versus if you have some sort of, say, for example, this company Let's Shave, you came up, it came up with low price online access to men's grooming product. The need was already there. They were in the existing market, but because of the online mechanism and the other, cost effective way they go about it, they were able to reach to a new market with a subscription model. So this is what they did. So I'm just they did not take a lot of time on converting their idea to something tangible. So it depends upon what kind of market you are in right now.
Right. That's very interesting. There's one question on similar thought on design thinking. I'll just, it's from Dipesh. Dipesh, if you want to unmute yourself and ask your question.
And turn on your video also.
And yeah, and please turn on your video if you wish, if you are okay with it.
Hey, am I audible?
Yes.
Okay, so my question was like, is design thinking something that, will going to give us a great start? Because whenever we go for the idea, right, either we are looking out for solving a big problem, and as you mentioned, as one of the pointers, that we go and find the customers. So I mean, design thinking is much more about looking out for what set of customers we are looking out for, and for which set of customer we are building that kind of product. So just that question.
Yeah, absolutely. And Dipesh, it's a very interesting question, because when I came into this field, I asked myself, why is everybody talking about design so much? I had to convince myself. First, I had a bit of a resistance. Like, why so much design? Like, what is this design? What does it actually mean? And then I understood, it's my own understanding, that design is a set of frameworks. Okay.
Correct.
And when you remember when we were discussing about the man turned upside down?
Yeah.
Yeah. So because we do not have metadata with us in those realms of uncertainty, it's a framework. It's a framework which enables us to get a grasp of a customer or other stakeholders, where we can work, downside up, where we can work on a smaller data, get a better grasp of what they actually want, and take this and convert into something more concrete. So I feel that design thinking frameworks are very important and help us in this particular way.
Correct. Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Just to add to that, Mrigank, initially when I was just reading up on design thinking, or even when I didn't know enough about it, looking at the different geographies, right? If I look at India, and maybe a good, well-designed, well thought-through product or service is great, but if you have not positioned it well, or if you have not priced it well, it will still not sell. So I guess that's something to keep in mind. For example, an apple is a great design, it's a wonderful product, but not everybody can afford it. It's still out of reach. So I think, again, it's the holistic thinking that comes into picture here.
Shweta, let me put this out there. Like, design and design thinking are two very different things in terms of the entire approach, and we'll discuss on more offline also about it. But I'm just saying that in terms of design thinking, it's the way you understand, put yourself in the shoes of your different stakeholders and see what do they actually want. And then there are different frameworks like, business model canvas, service design, where you see what are the touch points with the customer, and what are the back-end operations which the company does in corresponding to those touch points. Yeah. So there are different frameworks, but they are a bit different from the way we think about design.
Yeah, interesting. So I think Tanvi had a similar, or a kind of an add-on question to this. Tanvi, you want to ask your question?
Yeah, hi. My question was, Mrigank, you mentioned that, Apple is doing, one of their secret sauces was that they combined technology and humanities together to create successful products. And you also mentioned how, a lot of engineers basically tend to work around their idea in a very product specific way and not, validate enough. In that sense, opening up to a larger ecosystem, how essential is it for startups to understand the social context around their products?
It's absolutely. I think it's a core. Like, and we always, kind of when we talk to a startup, when we are talking about that this customer discovery phase where people are going out and discovering the customers rather than creating one, we say that startups might not be the founders might not be creating the product, but they need to talk to customers. So if I have two things, product development and customer development, and we have founders, we would not say that the founders should do product development. We would say that the founders should do customer development. And when they are doing that customer development, they need to understand the social context of things. That is very important. I think of prime importance.
Yeah.
I think there's one more question on design thinking, which we'll take. Nidhi, you want to unmute?
Design thinking has taken a lot of my mind space also for a while.
Nidhi, can you unmute yourself?
Hi, this is Nidhi. I wanted to ask one question on design thinking. I'm pretty new to this concept. Would design thinking also be applicable in consulting? And is there a concept of design thinking in consulting business? I'm pretty new to this concept, so just a basic question, maybe totally out of context.
Consulting, when you say as a consultant, can you use design thinking frameworks for your customers? Yes, yeah, absolutely. And let me tell you this, because we do a lot of onboarding of services. The most costly, consultants are the consultants who can do design thinking. So yes, it's a good value addition. It's a costly affair for incubators to get them involved. So yes, I think that's definitely design thinking as series of tools are good to be as a part of your arsenal if you're consulting as well.
No, because I just went on, like when we were discussing, I went on Google and searched what is design thinking. The first thing that appeared was PwC KPMG course on design thinking. And it was very highly priced. And I was thinking, what does KPMG or PwC has to do? It's in consulting line. It has to do with design thinking. So,
Nidhi, I can't hear you that well. Like, I understood that you searched for design thinking and you got a course which was highly priced.
By PwC, which is a consulting firm, PwC, KPMG. So, so how are they using design thinking in advising on financial transactions?
So, Shweta, can you did you get the question?
Yeah, so I think Nidhi's asking about that particular course that she looked up, which was from PwC, and how are they using it or leveraging it in there, because it's a consulting firm, right? PwC and KPMG. So I think she wants to understand the association and.
So there are now consulting firms are getting into implementation of a lot of frameworks. If you see things like even Six Sigma and all, the KPMG is doing that. So these consulting firms are definitely getting into that education market and they have certain products there as well. But I would like to take this opportunity to bring up a different point. So in this world of design thinking, what has happened is that consultancies are creating a lot of money based on their design thinking frameworks, because it is helpful to startups. What our endeavor is to enable startups to be able to design think themselves. They should not always need a consulting firm to kind of help them in thinking in the design thinking way. I see this as a difference. Like there should not be a critical dependence for them to all the time go to consultancies and get feedback on design thinking. We should inculcate that ability within the startups themselves. This is our endeavor. We are still working towards it. I would not say we have achieved it, but that is one of our endeavors. And having said that, I would also say that design thinking still is one of the set of tools which we have in the entrepreneurship framework, like having 30 other tools, like having hundreds of other tools right now. So design thinking is a set of frameworks, but has its own place.
Okay.
You have disciplined entrepreneurship framework from MIT. You have technology adoption cycle from George Murray. Then you have lean methodology from Steve Black when they talk about them, how the entire thing which we were talking about. Then you have design thinking frameworks. So there are a lot of things which we do with our startup. Design thinking frameworks are definitely, especially in the initial phase, they are very useful to get the right kind of framework in place. We use a combination of design thinking and lean to kind of iteratively come to a certain point where the deliverables and the goals of the startups are reduced to those elegant, non-reducible set of goals. We do it to begin with in the first month.
Makes sense. There are a couple of questions on very important aspect, which is the financial considerations that we need to take. The first one is from Ullas Gupta. Ullas, you can unmute yourself.
And start your video and ask.
Yeah, if you can also turn on the video if you wish to.
Here goes. So hey Mrigank, thanks for the session. My question was primarily on the financial aspect. So when you have a startup or when you've got an idea, it's great to kind of start working on it and try a few MVPs probably, which may not be expensive, but there will be a stage where we really have to start considering how much money we need to, how much capex we need, right? How much capital expenditure we need to really kick it off to a reasonable level. So at what are those assumptions, or how do we build that thought process around, the financial aspect of a startup? And at what stage can we say that, okay, we really need to go to a VC or pitch it to a VC for further funding?
It's a fantastic question, actually. And I would, use a layered approach to answer it, actually. So you are doing a couple of things in parallel. We are working on a product. We are talking to our customers. We have MVP 1. We went to technology enthusiasts and visionaries. We are doing this process in parallel, right? At the same time, as you rightly said, that there will be a point of time where you cannot just, spend your own money and just work by yourself. You would need some finance. When you get your first whiff of validation, you will know it. Like I was just talking to a startup guy, and he was asking, like, there was a fund, and this guy he had a hypothesis that I will create a radio for all the college communities, but it would be community specific. So I asked him that, are you saying that you want to marry Facebook to podcast? Is this something which you are looking at? He said, yes, you got it right. Like, I'm trying to do that. But I said that before asking money, did you do a couple of podcasts and created those WhatsApp groups to see whether internally generated podcasts are getting the right kind of absorption, that validation? Once you get that whiff of validation, the moment you get it and okay, this is going viral, you would understand that. Once you do that, at the same time, there are a lot of financing options for a startup. You should not go to VC to begin with, because right now you are too small. You are just validated yourself. You should look at funds. There are a lot of incubators who fund. There are a lot of government grants if you are doing something right. The government money is actually the easiest money to get, and government does encourage startups. DST is a department, NITI Aayog is a department. They have certain seed funds allocated. There are a lot of say for example, if you are into some impact space, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation would give you some piloting opportunities. So to begin with, you should kind of look into those non-funds which do not take your equity and are like grants to begin with, so that you have some money to get to the right kind of validation point. Once you have the right kind of data and you are robust about it, then you go to somebody like a angel. You still don't go to a VC. You go to an angel, then you go to a micro VC, and then you go to a VC. Because if you go to somebody before your stage, it will not, it can be predatory. It can be, the VC might think that he's kind of helping you and he's getting a good deal. But only good deal is which is balanced between the founder and the VC. Any unbalance from either side would actually take the startup down and was not in the interest of the founder or the VC. So it's very interesting to match your customer cycle to your product cycle to your funding cycle. That synergy should be there.
Got it. So it's basically like, I would say at the first point of validation of your idea with customers is when we have to actually start, or rather when we should start looking for external sources, which are probably like what you mentioned, government funds or some sort of angel investment. So
And even before that, hackathons, business model, business money which you get, from these competitions. These are there. Like I am a great believer of not putting your money more than what is required. Like one should, like I see a lot of founders who say that I am strong with this idea, I'll put in more money and I'll go ahead with this. But the problem with this is, this is the same problem with solo founders also. Like if you are not able to get a buy-in from other guy in your own team, there is something wrong with your idea. You have to kind of pivot. Getting the first money and getting other people invested in your company is the first validation which you will get about your team, your product, your market, and everything. So that's why we should always facilitate external money and external people joining us as co-founders.
Got it.
Solo doesn't work. Like there might be few examples, but if you take, overall, being a solo founder is a very difficult journey. Like the first thing which we do with our own startups, if they are solo founder, is that even before investing that money with them, is something which we kind of nudge them to get a co-founder. And this is a global standard. Like a lot of incubators and accelerators do that. Because that team element is very important. Like that group of people who are synergistically working to get that functions executed, that group is very important.
Got it. Thank you.
Thanks, Mrigank. I think Sharanya also had a question which is similar to, you probably answered it a little bit, but Sharanya, if you want to go ahead and ask your question.
Right. I think he did answer the question to the T, but I had just because I had another variation to it. Mrigank, could you sort of, you said go to a micro VC, go to an angel investor, and then go to a VC and so on. Like, sorry, I didn't get the right order. But what would be the differences in terms of how you pitch before any of these folks? Like, when you're pitching before an angel investor over like, micro VC and then, VC. And the second question, just to also bring, I had one more. How would you look at it from a nonprofit, trying to build and sort of come with that same idea of validation and things like that for a nonprofit versus a for-profit startup? Yeah.
So if I can break the question into two, the second question is that, is that the question that, do you consider an NGO as a startup or not? And if
right, something more on the social impacting side, but I think I would keep it, something on that side, yeah.
So in this particular question, I think that you can consider social impact as a startup, and you would find so many social impact startups across the globe right now. And it's a very interesting thing. Like AIC ISB Association is a Section 8 company. It's an NGO, and I run it as a startup. So because that's what I know, and that's what the stage of the company is. So, but then I see, the accounting considerations and everything are different. But as far as you think about the way company operates, I think there is no difference between a for-profit and for-impact kind of a company. That way. To answer your second question first. And the second question which you asked about was, how do you pitch to different sectors of people? So I think that, access to government grants, you need to focus on impact. When you talk to angels are the people who will first put in your money. They are the risk takers. They are the people of those who are technology enthusiasts and visionaries. They will bet on nothing also. If they would bet on the team, actually. They would bet on their passion and the way you are going about things. And VCs, they are good followers. They will not bet on your idea. They will not bet on your team. They will see proper traction, proper things, proper matrix, and then they will invest on you. So VCs, the way you pitch to VCs is a very matrix-driven thing. The way you pitch to angels is around idea, around passion, around your team. Team is the key, actually. There's this startup. I'll not take the name, but these were 3 founders, and the startup, the functionality was to improve stammering, and they were doing it through an app. The beauty of it was that 2 of the founders were stammerers by themselves, and they used the app kind of technique to kind of convert, and they were giving the presentation, and they were doing it fantastically. See the kind of message these guys are giving. It actually incited a lot of passion right there. They got invested right there by it. But
Right.
you do not get this sort of, warm-hearted, response from a VC. VCs are very technical in their approach that way. And this is my bit on it. We can have different views around it. I would not cast it as something which is very rigid around this, but this is what I understand from the ecosystem.
All right. Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah.
So Mrigank, you're saying different phases of pitching, right? And there are different people you pitch to, and pretty much how much have you seen this question on the timing that has come up from the investors? Like, why are you doing this now? Why now question by the investors? And how do you kind of address the right timing? Because I think you did touch upon it in your presentation, but how do you convince that the same thing to an investor?
Why now?
Yeah.
So, if we follow that customer discovery framework, till the time you reach an investor, you have enough validation. And this is what I have observed in this ecosystem, that capital follows talent. Like as people, we see that people are not investing and they hold on to their money. But if you actually go to the market and see, VCs have a different story to tell you. They would say, I am ready with money. This guy is just not taking my money. You would find these kind of people also. So once you have the right kind of validation with you, the capital will follow talent. And I see this. So as far as time is concerned, it's about validation. Once you are validated, you can take it forward. It's not about the timing, it's what you have in hand. You can show that this is absorption, this is where the market is responding, this is the time right now, this is how it is happening.
And the scientific approach that you were mentioning about will help you bring credibility to the idea.
Start from the very beginning in the right kind of approach. If for example, you have a product, if you have a sales team, but your product is in MVP stage, and also your organization and your product stage is very different, and you are operating in, say, futuristic market, and then you go to a VC, then you should know that, this money would take actually 7 years. With or without this money, you would take 6 years to kind of develop the market. In that time you are spending money on sales, which will give no results. Versus then this is about branding. That when you are in a futuristic market, you have to talk about branding. Like in terms of, like, for example, if I have a Google Glass, right? That I know Google as a technology-driven company today. If I have a Google Glass, then I will buy from Google. But if some Chinese company sells me a glass, I will not buy from them. But so this is when we are in long-term market, we are looking at branding. But when we are in the existing market, we are looking at product differentiation. So the entire, the advertising strategy and the marketing strategy pivots.
Yeah, got it. Makes sense. I think we are a little over time, so maybe we'll take one more question. I think we have Aman. Aman, you had a question?
Yeah. So, as you mentioned about your scientific approach, and also I think Ulas's your reply to Ulas's question, and you've seen so many companies. What kind of advice can you give entrepreneurs on idea validation and pivoting once they realize probably that their ideas are not the right fit? Do you see sometimes entrepreneurs are too married to an idea or too product oriented, whereby they're not sort of able to take that pivot? Or do the time on the data validation, on the idea validation, and they move straight to execution?
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what, Aman, this is the whole reason we want a team and not a solo founder. Because when you have a solo founder, this guy, it's very difficult to kind of even demonstrate that, that marriage of a person and the idea and the team and the function is so sacrosanct, it's very difficult to operate there. That's why you need different people within your team so that they can give different perspective that builds in the right kind of psychology while approaching the entire startup approach, where that you can be wrong sometime and the other person can be right sometime, and it has to be put out for validation. And as far as validation is concerned, it has to be lean, like as I discussed, that you do not really need to develop a product and go for validation. You need to develop, there are different ways of validating things. Like you can just develop a video and do a split test, launch to test customers, 10 customers, and see that these 10, how are they responding from these 10 in different market segments. Simple things like, like even before doing that, you go to Google Trends and see where this word is used more. You would get to see what are the states who are more interested in this particular kind of thing. So from primary research to secondary research, you kind of start refining your kind of idea, and then you kind of reach out to the customer for that particular validation in the cheapest manner possible. And the lean framework is around that. And things like like if you talk about this Ola guy, once somebody like in one of the pitching sessions, one of the VCs were part of his initial pitches, and they were sharing with us that earlier he used to use it, operate entire thing using phone. He did not even have an app at that point of time. He did not invest in an app. He understood the need by talking to people, by booking cabs on the BPO kind of a system, and then gravitated towards an app. So that sort of investment where you are going ahead of what your customer need understanding is something should be avoided.
Got it. Thanks a lot. Yeah, thanks a lot.
Yeah. Thank you, Mrigank. I think we will have to close it here. We are a little over time, but thank you so much for your time and efforts